subscribe and leave a comment below. r/AskReddit. What was the most awkward thing you witnessed in a school classroom? NSFW. This one time in 3rd grade, the boy next to me went under his desk and took his clothes off because he wanted to be invisible. It only works if you aren't looking at him. My 30-year-old teacher admitted she was a virgin to a class of high school sophomores. That didn't end well. How did that even come up? We had mentally handicapped kid who started jacking it during sex ed. That's called class participation. Some kid that pulled his hard-on out during a movie to impress us, not his girlfriend. When I was in the 6th grade, one of my classmates took off his prosthetic leg and tried to hit the teacher with it. Guy just beating his meat during a history lesson, full sweat on and everything. His grunting face is ingrained in me, forever grunting. We had a mentally challenged kid who stood up in the middle of lunch and threw his tray of food against the wall and ran out of the room screaming. The assistant principal walked past my table saying I guess he didn't like the soup. Kid in my sophomore math class would massage rub his girlfriend's bare feet for most of class, every day. That girl was the happiest person in the entire school. In 7th grade, there was this girl that was known for doing all kinds of weird shit. She cut a chunk of her hair off and left it on my friend's desk as a birthday present. Meowed at people and cried when anyone stepped on a bug. The most awkward incident happened when she dropped her pencil during a test. I guess she was too shy to ask the person next to her for it, so she tried to stretch for it and ended up flipping her desk over. She then continued to do her test in her desk sideways for another 10 minutes until the teacher told another student to flip her over. There was a kid in my school who was kind of problematic. One day, during a math test, he grabbed the test papers, went to the corner of the classroom and peed on them. Sorry teacher, I can't finish the test, there's piss on it. During the lunch break, this guy who was eating a sandwich was on the verge of sneezing. So he finally sneezes and I see the piece of sandwich flying, I'm not kidding, into the mouth of my classmate who was busy laughing. His confused expression was priceless. Middle school chemistry class. The ceiling vent fan had not been used since at least the previous spring term. Pigeons had nested in it unbeknownst to the teacher. Fan used during a demonstration. Pandemonium reigned that day. Blood and feathers reigned that day. There was 2 kids known for playing this joke on substitute teachers. It goes like this. Student A tells the sub to ask student B how many push-ups his grandpa can do. Student B tells a story, while pretending to cry, about how his grandpa lost both his arms in the war. Multiple substitutes broke out in tears crying and had to leave. I was in 9th grade, so 14-15 years old at the time. We were having sex ed and a big group of us we given a bunch of sex words on paper, like vaginal sex, oral sex, kissing and masturbation. Stuff like that. I got masturbation. We had to line up in an order from least likely to spread diseases to most likely. Well, I had masturbation, so I stood at the end where I was least likely to transmit a disease to someone. When we were done, the teacher looked at it and asked me, is it masturbation with just yourself or others? Well, I only masturbate by myself, so it's just with myself. The laughter was awful. The moment I said it, I could see the regret the teacher had for making an already awkward boy even more awkward. I had an English teacher who was an admittedly fat kid back in his high school days. He had a certain swagger / inexplicably mean and attention seeking way about him that told us every day was a chance to act out mean girl fantasies he couldn't achieve as a once bullied 240 shorty. He lost all the weight and was now a tall, lean dude. He even took hip hop classes and would sometimes bust out moves for the class. I fucking hated this guy. One day, he strode up to a girl in our class who was devastatingly beautiful, but also a pretty kick-ass girl power kind of chick. She was doodling while he was lecturing, so he picked up her pencil bag. She was artistic and this bag was full of supplies, and dumped it onto the ground. Smirking, this badass bitch looks him dead in the eye and says, "Pick it up." He scoffs, "No, She goes, "That was completely inappropriate. Pick it up, or I'm going straight to the principal and explaining how you just dumped my personal belongings onto the ground and tried to humiliate me." The class was dead silent watching this, and after a few tense moments, he slowly bends down and picks everything up. It took him a while, and it was the most cringy, awkward thing I have ever seen live in my entire life. Edit. Forgot to mention he had lost the weight. In high school I reached down for a binder that was in my backpack on the floor. I reached down to grab it, and when I positioned myself back upright in my chair, I ended up scooping the teacher's boobs, who was walking down the aisle, with my head. We just kinda looked at each other in fear and no words came out of either of our mouths. Nobody else saw it or at least made a point to say that they saw it. I like to think it was just our little uncomfortable secret. In 2nd grade of high school, a student flipped the F out and started throwing chairs and his desk at the teacher because he was refused a test reprisal upon failing it the first time. Shit got super scary. He was yelling like crazy and the female teacher was trying to protect herself from the things thrown at her. Another teacher next door barged in, grabbed the enraged student, nailed him on the floor, face down, and tied his feet and arms together with his belt and shoelace. I remember him being taken away and we never saw him again. I think the teachers ate him. This mentally handicapped kid in my class named Mark was always super infatuated with this really smart nice girl in our class. He would always talk about how he was going to make her his girlfriend and she was always just too nice to him to tell him it wasn't going to happen. This went on for years. Anyways, one day someone thought it would be funny to tell Mark I was dating the love of his life. I wasn't. Mark flipped his shit and found me in the hallway and pushed me up against this gigantic topographical plaster map of Alberta. The Rocky Mountains cut into my back as he pushed me harder into it and yelled into my face while crying about how Tessa was his girlfriend and I need to leave her alone. I told him I wasn't dating her and he ran off crying. Poor guy. Edit. Where do I exchange this gold for tangible money? I don't know if this is awkward or more uncomfortably sad. When I was in middle school, pretty tight knit, a kid had died on Saturday. I had a couple classes with him but didn't know him that well. Well, on Monday my second class of the day had a sub and the kid who died happened to have been in that class. I guess no one clued the sub in, because she called his name during attendance. It was deafeningly silent and felt like the air was slowly being sucked out of the room. After a second or two she called his name again and several people burst into sobs and ran from the room. Then I heard someone whisper he died. Another teacher I had was absent that day too. I think he had some prior engagement as opposed to randomly taking a sick day, and the next day when he came back, the boy that died was also in this class. He was apologizing profusely for not being there for us and everything. At some point during his little speech he started crying and slammed his fist down on his desk. It was so sad. He truly felt awful for not being there that day. My professor for a computer science class had his phone go off during a lecture one day. He's a pretty chill old man. So everyone starts giggling and some people are yelling at him to answer it. He looks at his phone and says, "Oh no, I'm not answering. My brother died today and I have to make funeral arrangements. I'll call back later." And then he moved on with his lecture. I've never seen a room so awkwardly quiet and sad. So part of my job at the time had me meeting with teachers and schools to discuss alternative programs for students. One of the teachers had been working there for 20 plus years. She had job security and would tell exactly what she thought. It led to some awkward exchanges when discussing students. Things like, "Oh, he's crazier than a shithouse rat. You don't want him in a place without heavy security." Double quote. The most awkward however was when she said she really gets around for a girl with one arm, like a slot machine that pays out in blowjobs. A friend of mine was bragging about how he could sleep with any of the girls in the class. My other friend decided to put his boast to the test by asking all girls at once, loudly. The one guy that slept through every class raised his hand. This reminds me of a game people in my class would play. When the teacher would leave, these two kids would stand up on their desks and say in a game show voice, "It's time for another exciting round of Who's Corey's Friend," and then encourage anyone who was Corey's friend to raise their hand. Nobody ever did. Kids are cruel. This really weird nerdy boy asked the prettiest girl to homecoming with this crazy big sign right in front of the entire class, but she already had a date. Edit. He didn't know, but everyone else did. That's what made it awkward as duck. Edit 2. Despite being one of the most pretty and popular girls, she's really down to earth and understanding. So after class she talked to him and basically told him that this shouldn't keep him down from trying to find a date, etc. Source. I'm friends with said girl. In 7th grade we were watching breast exam videos. Now this required a great deal of maturity on our end that admittedly, we all failed. When the doctor checking this beautiful woman's breasts turned to the camera and smiled and gave a thumbs up, we fell out pretty hard at that one. As the teacher is trying to get this entirely male class to calm down, they segregated sex ed. Someone starts actually screaming and freaking out and shouting, "Holy shit, look at." Turns out, over in the corner, that kid was going to ducking town on his junk in a way none of us had ever seen before. Just mangling it viciously in the corner. You know that Dave Chappelle skit about being held hostage by a masturbator on a bus? This was like that. No one knew what to do. Everyone froze. Then, he just sat down, pants still half off, bright red, and started sobbing. So that I was in the first day of a PE class with a classically intense coach. He bounced students out of the first week with ease. This one kid didn't follow his instructions, so he told him to get out. The kid remains silent and doesn't budge. The teacher comes up and starts yelling at him to leave. The kid walks up in his face and doesn't move. The entire class is watching, just wondering if this is how we all die. Eventually he walked out, but it was uncomfortable as duck. Edit. Then the kid exploded into moths and swarmed all the light sources, inducing total blackness. We all ran, and to this day that room is quarantined because it's still black with moths. I hope this makes it up to all of you who expected something bigger to go down. My period starting. I was also wearing a white dress and sat in front of a guy I had a huge crush on. Go me. I was swimming in our school's pool and cut my foot pretty badly on the diving board. I didn't notice it was bleeding when in the pool. The blood just washed away until I got out and walked around to the diving board again, leaving little blood spots wherever my foot touched. The teacher stopped everyone and made us hold still while he searched out who was getting blood all over. With the pool area in dead silence, he followed it over to me, who had just noticed it and had just realized that it was coming from my foot, and said loudly, "What Nick, if you're going to menstruate in my class, would you have the decency to plug IT up?" Like some sort of wannabe comedian who was modeling his style of humor after the Carrie movie. I got tampons thrown at me for 2 years at that school and pads constantly stuck to my locker, all clean except for one. Inexplicably, I went to school with this kid. I think his name was Matt. Matt was in a wheelchair, but he was a ducking donghead. He used to sing NSYNC in the hallway and run into girls with his wheelchair. You could tell he was socially ducked up from being the wheelchair kid, but you could also tell he knew how to play the wheelchair card like a champ. Eventually the school started giving him punishments for being such a douchebag. So I'm sitting in the in-school suspension room. It's ducking pack because in-school suspension is awesome, and there was a substitute that day. Matt's in there too. He was being a dong but then quieted down. So I'm sitting there, probably a little stoned, and I see Matt start rolling towards the door super slow. I look over at the teacher and she has her head down, probably doing a little self-loathing, because who the duck wants to be the in-school suspension teacher? And so I look back and he keeps rolling closer and closer to the door. I give him the look. I co-signed this shit. He grabs the handle and that's when the teacher looks up. He ducking bolted out of the door. The teacher yells, runs out into the hallway, and he's nowhere to be found. She gets on the phone and tells whoever that man just rolled out of the classroom. It was pretty awkward, letting a kid in the wheelchair escape the room. Edit. Some spelling. I was in the 9th grade, and there was a girl in my classroom who broke both of her arms. So she had them in the cast that held her arms above her waist. Now this girl wasn't the most popular, and she was best friends with another girl who was equally awkward as she was. I will never forget when the best friend raised her hand to get the attention of the teacher. The teacher called on the best friend, and she asked if she and her broken-armed friend could use the restroom together. And the teacher asks, "Why would you need to go together?" She replies just like this, "I have to unzip and take off her pants." Looking back, I understand now that she just wanted to help her friend use the restroom. But imagine being in 9th grade and you hear this. Everyone in the classroom was silent. Then one kid started laughing. Then everyone started laughing. And that is how the lesbian rumors started about the two. High school can be a beach. This was in middle school. The bell went off for us to go to our next class and I noticed a girl had bled through onto her light colored blue jeans. Even with me being the kind of boy that no girl would ever talk to if she wanted to keep what little status she might have had with the other girls in the school, I took the risk that might come with having a conversation with a girl. I quickly walked up right behind her, like creeper close. Put my hands on her shoulders to get her to slow down a little and I leaned in and whispered into her ear, "You've bled through your pants. I will follow you to the girls' bathroom. Just act normal," and took my hands off her shoulders. She never looked back. She didn't say a word. We walked nearly bumper to the girls' bathroom. I kept on walking past and off to my next class. I never spoke to her again. I don't remember her face or her name anymore, but I wonder sometimes if I had crossed the line of creeper or kindness. Edit. English is hard. PS. I have been reading every reply and upvoting nearly all of them. Thanks everyone for the thumbs up on helping her out and making me feel less awkward about it. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comment.